Hollywood is no stranger to drama, but even by its own chaotic standards, this was unprecedented. Two of the most powerful directors alive, Francis Lawrence and Steven Spielberg, didn't just distance themselves from rising star Rachel Zegler. According to multiple insider accounts, they exposed her brutally, deliberately, and with a level of coordination that suggested this wasn't just about one film or one bad day on set. It was allegedly a career takedown years in the making. The whispers had been circling for a while. Zgler was said to be difficult, entitled, and dismissive of the very legends who paved the path she now walked. But those were just whispers. Until now. Now, the whispers are being replaced with call logs, leaked memos, and one explosive phone call that's still reverberating across every studio lot in town. From the outside, Zgler seemed unstoppable. Bursting onto the scene as Maria in Spielberg's West Side Story, she was hailed as the next big thing, a Disney princess in the making, a voice for Gen Z. But behind the scenes, the picture was far less polished. Steven Spielberg, a director who's worked with everyone from Tom Hanks to Meryl Streep, reportedly saw the red flags immediately. Zgler wasn't just inexperienced, she was, in his words, a set killer. According to crew reports, she challenged blocking, mid-scene, refused reshoots unless her notes were followed, and dismissed decades-old dialogue with eye rolls and improvisation. Lighting techs were reportedly treated with contempt. Producers were panicking by week 3. It wasn't that she was woke, industry insiders say. Hollywood is used to activism. It was that she was woke in a way that alienated collaborators, clashed with creative teams, and ignored the basic courtesies that keep massive productions afloat. Spielberg didn't lash out. He stayed silent, took notes, waited. But when Zgler's attitude reportedly worsened during awards season, when egos tend to inflate, he'd had enough. 2 quick calls later, the damage was done. The first call was to a top studio head. The second to a casting executive. The message was clear: never again. And when someone like Steven Spielberg says that, you listen. But Zgler didn't back down. Instead, she fired shots in interviews, thinly veiled digs at old-school directors who couldn't handle strong women. The industry got the subtext. She was talking about him. And that, according to multiple sources, was the moment. Everything changed. Hollywood has a quiet way of canceling someone. No headlines, no lawsuits, just silence. Projects disappear, calls go unreturned, schedules suddenly don't line up. Rachel Zegler, once Hollywood's darling, became Hollywood's ghost, and then came the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Francis Lawrence, returning to the franchise that helped mint billions, walked onto set with high hopes. What he got, according to insiders, was a rerun of Spielberg's Nightmare. From the first day, Zgler allegedly acted like she was the franchise. She demanded last-minute rewrites, stormed off set over camera angles she deemed unfeminine, refused wardrobe choices that didn't align with her modern ideals. The crew was stunned. Some of them had worked on the original Hunger Games films. They knew intensity. But this was something else. Reddit threads popped up from anonymous PAs. Words like toxic, chaotic, and unpredictable started floating around. The phrase, walking into a bomb shelter, wasn't used lightly. One assistant described each day as a gamble. Would she cooperate, or would the production spiral into delays? What should have been 10-hour shoot days ballooned into 16-hour marathons? All because, insiders claim, Rachel wanted to debate the emotional realism of fictional song lyrics. She rewrote lines mid-take, refused to sign, off on scenes without a creative consult, and the performance itself, critics tore it apart. Fans called it lifeless, but the real blow came from Lawrence himself. According to leaks from Lionsgate boardrooms, Lawrence told executives, "I'll never babysit that attitude again." Think about that. A director who helped make Jennifer, Lawrence, a global icon, walked away after one film with Zgler. Not because of a weak performance, not because of scheduling, but because, as he allegedly said, she acts like she's doing us a favor, like she's the franchise, not part of it. That statement didn't just sting. It echoed, loudly, and then came the call that changed everything. It was late 2024. Francis Lawrence had just wrapped post-production on the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. By all accounts, it should have been a celebration. But instead of popping champagne, Lawrence made a quiet phone call, not to the studio, not to Lionsgate PR, but to someone who had already lived through the same storm, Steven Spielberg. Sources say it wasn't a long call. just a few minutes. But what spilled out was raw frustration. Years of mounting tension finally finding a shared outlet. And what made this moment explosive? The call, allegedly on speakerphone, was overheard by a grip. That grip passed it to a mid-tier YouTuber. And then, the internet did what it does best. The leak was instant. 2 titans, 1 nightmare, same actress. According to the report, Spielberg didn't hold back. She weaponizes her image but has no respect for the craft. Lawrence reportedly agreed. She acts like she's doing us a favor, like she's the franchise. They weren't just venting, they were forming a pact, a quiet alliance. The message: protect your sets, protect your crews, and protect your art from what they dubbed the Zgler effect. That phrase caught fire. Within weeks, casting executives started flagging her name. Warner Bros., Universal, even Paramount reportedly backed away from projects where Zgler's name was floated. One insider claimed Spielberg's own assistant had advised a producer with 2 words: not advisable. And just like that, her career trajectory collapsed. Her representatives panicked. One source claimed her manager sent out a desperate mass email offering Zegler at a reduced quote for prestige indies. Usually, directors would fight over that. But this time, crickets. Not even indie filmmakers wanted the baggage. And Hollywood? It didn't say a word. It didn't have to. The silence spoke volumes. Studio heads stopped returning calls. Schedules conveniently filled up. Zegler's name stopped appearing on cast wish lists. Even meetings, just casual coffee meetings, vanished. On the outside, it looked like she was taking a break. On the inside, she was being iced out. YouTube gossip channels started connecting the dots. Reddit exploded with theories. But this wasn't fan fiction, this was happening in real time. Channels like Bounding Into Comics pulled quotes from old interviews where Rachel tried to flip the narrative. I have to be fearless and loud. She probably meant it as empowering, but the internet didn't see strength. They saw self-victimization. Twitter mocked it, TikTok shredded her. And in boardrooms, executives rolled their eyes. Because in Hollywood, perception is everything, and once that perception sours, when casting directors ghost your agent, you're done. Rachel's defenders called it sexism, called it generational misunderstanding, called it backlash against change. But no hashtag could change the facts. 2 of Hollywood's most respected directors were done. And everyone else followed. Then came the final blow. Snow White. March 2025. Disney had poured nearly $350 million into a bold reimagining of a classic. Zgler, cast as the titular heroine, was supposed to lead a new era, but opening weekend numbers were catastrophic. A humiliating $43 million domestic return. No red carpet, no junkets, no press tour. Disney, according to sources, feared she'd drop another political grenade in front of reporters. Insiders at Vanity Fair didn't mince words. They blamed the film's failure on endless PR landmines, and many of them traced back to Zgler. Her interviews became viral disasters. Her quotes were called condescending, out of touch, and deeply alienating to core audiences. And then came the internal memo. According to one report, Disney quietly tagged Zgler with a "Do Not Hire" label. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't announced. But insiders say that internal Blacklist was the final confirmation that her time at the top was over. Shortly after, Spielberg and Lawrence were spotted having lunch in Los Angeles. No one knows exactly what was said, but multiple sources claim they didn't discuss revenge. They discussed rebuilding, how to restore sets, morale, and trust after the damage. And as they left the table, one quote was overheard and repeated across the city. "If the studios won't protect crews, we will." That line, it became gospel. Word spread at light speed. Talent agencies backed off. Casting directors became stricter. Showrunners whispered warnings. And Rachel, she tried to fight back. In a cryptic tweet she posted, "Silence is violence." 10 minutes later it vanished, but screenshots live forever. The damage was done. Hollywood didn't cancel her with a bang. It canceled her with whispers, decisions, and silence. Spielberg and Lawrence didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. Their reputations did all the talking. For a moment, there was silence, but not the kind that offers peace. The kind that signals you're no longer welcome. Rachel Zegler wasn't just on a break. She was, to put it bluntly, radioactive. The irony? She had once been hailed as the future of Hollywood, young, bold, outspoken, the exact archetype modern studios claim to celebrate. But what Hollywood loves even more than a rising star is a cautionary tale. And now, insiders weren't just avoiding her, they were using her as a warning. Producers began referring to her situation as the Zgler Scenario, an internal label whispered during casting meetings to screen out talent who might bring more heat than light. She changed the temperature of a room, one Lionsgate source reportedly said, and not in a good way. But this wasn't simply a personality clash, it was bigger than that. Because when Steven Spielberg, a man who made careers, built franchises, and reshaped entire genres, quietly blacklists someone, it becomes a ripple effect. Spielberg, known for discretion, never issued a statement. He didn't rant to the press or tweet his frustrations. He didn't have to. All he did was stop taking meetings that involved her name. And when a legend opts out, Hollywood takes notice. At first, some thought it might blow over. Maybe it was just a bad shoot. Maybe Zgler would do an apology tour, lean into some PR coaching, turn things around. But the tide never turned. In fact, it got worse. Because Francis Lawrence wasn't just frustrated, he was allegedly furious. The man behind 3 Hunger Games blockbusters, credited with helping mold Jennifer Lawrence into a household name, reportedly told Lionsgate's board, "I can't work like that again." And according to internal emails, he made it clear that her presence on set had crippled production morale and compromised artistic flow. Multiple crew members backed him up, describing the set of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes as exhausting, tense, and hostile. One lighting assistant described it as walking on eggshells, if eggshells could scream. Another added that Zgler seemed more interested in being a symbol than being a scene partner, and that's where things broke wide open. Because this wasn't just about one performance or one movie. It was about a pattern. And once patterns emerge in Hollywood, especially with names like Spielberg and Lawrence attached, they become unspoken law. Studios started doing quiet background checks on any actress with even a hint of controversy. Managers warned clients not to pull a Zgler. Publicists quietly buried interviews that might read as too activist adjacent. And all the while, Rachel's team tried to stop the bleeding. They couldn't. She'd been offered legacy roles: Maria in West Side Story, Snow White in a Disney reboot, a lead in the Hunger Games universe. These weren't auditions you earned. These were once-in-a-career gifts. And instead of using them as platforms, insiders claim she turned them into personal crusades. There's nothing wrong with wanting change. Hollywood has always needed reform. But what unnerved so many people was how she allegedly demanded change while showing disrespect to the very people tasked with building her stage. Assistant directors, cinematographers, set designers, crew who had poured decades into their craft, suddenly being second-guessed by a star still new to the game. She acted like she knew better than everyone. One production staffer said, "It wasn't confidence, it was contempt." That contempt, reportedly, reached critical mass during the final weeks of Songbirds and Snakes filming. She refused multiple wardrobe choices, requested entire scenes be rewritten to reflect contemporary themes. And worst of all, she allegedly shut down scenes mid-take, complaining about lighting angles and calling them sexist. To be clear, this wasn't just diva behavior, this was disruption on an industrial scale. Some insiders believe the final straw for Lawrence came not during filming, but during test screenings. Viewers, expecting depth and fire, described her performance as cold, detached, and annoyingly self-aware. One focus group summary reportedly read, "She doesn't disappear into the role, she lectures it." That single line spread like wildfire across Lionsgate, and soon after, the industry, Spielberg and Lawrence never issued a joint statement. But their private opinions, leaked in fragments, became louder than any press release. And when they allegedly vowed to warn others, the ripple became a tsunami. That vow, to warn others, wasn't idle talk. It triggered a chain reaction inside Hollywood's tightest circles. According to one source, Spielberg's team began quietly advising casting executives to move cautiously when Zgler's name came up. Francis Lawrence allegedly did the same, passing along warnings during informal meetups with fellow directors. Within weeks, agencies started removing her from internal shortlists. Production meetings that had once featured her name as a priority, lead, suddenly skipped over it. She wasn't being blackballed in headlines, she was being erased from PowerPoint decks. And that's how Hollywood cancels someone without ever saying the word. Behind closed doors, the term Zgler proofing started trending among film executives. It meant asking the right questions in pre-production. Is this actor collaborative? Will they trust the team? Are we hiring talent or tension? Rachel Zegler had become the cautionary tale no one wanted to say out loud, but everyone understood. Even the streaming giants took notice. One insider at a mid-budget Amazon Prime project revealed that a producer had initially floated Zegler's name for a lead role, only to be met with an immediate shake of the head and one word: toxic. The offer never went out. It didn't. Help that her social media presence only made things worse. In a landscape where every word is dissected and reposted in seconds, Zegler's comments often felt like PR landmines. She clapped back at critics, made pointed, sarcastic remarks about traditional storytelling, dismissed beloved characters as outdated and regressive. But while that kind of fire might have worked on Twitter, it didn't fly in a business where billions are at stake. Producers began viewing her as a financial liability, not because she lacked talent, but because she couldn't be trusted to stay on message. One exec reportedly said, "You never know what she's going to say next, and that makes her dangerous." And in this industry, dangerous doesn't mean edgy, it means unbankable. That was the final pivot point. Rachel's team made one last effort, a rebranding campaign. Quietly, her reps pitched her to indie directors as a misunderstood creative, someone who just needed the right project to let her shine. They offered her at a dramatically reduced rate, promised flexibility, even hinted she'd take on supporting roles to rebuild. Still, nothing. Not because no one believed in second chances, but because no one wanted to be the next to deal with the chaos. And while all this was happening, Hollywood insiders were still talking about that lunch between Spielberg and Lawrence. Eyewitnesses described them as calm, composed, two veterans comparing battle scars. No yelling, no anger, just mutual understanding. And one line, heard clearly as they parted ways, echoed louder than anything else. "If the studios won't protect crews, we will." That line, simple, powerful, rippled through the industry like a thunderclap. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reputation, protection, standards. Because at the end of the day, sets run on more than cameras and scripts. They run on trust, on respect, on collaboration. And when someone, no matter how talented, violates that sacred space, it leaves a mark. Rachel Zegler wasn't the first to fall from grace. She won't be the last. But what makes her story different is how quickly the tide turned. One moment, she was the face of two of Hollywood's biggest legacy franchises. The next, she was a cautionary tale told in hushed tones between studio execs and agents. She had everything: talent, looks, momentum. But in the eyes of those who worked closest with her, it wasn't enough to outweigh the disruption. And that disruption, once voiced by Spielberg and Lawrence, became Hollywood law. Her final tweet before going silent read, "Silence is violence." But the silence that followed was not an act of violence. It was a verdict, one delivered not by a court, not by a mob, but by the people who matter most in this town, the ones who decide who gets hired tomorrow. When the dust settled, one truth remained. In Hollywood, silence is not just golden, it's lethal. Rachel Zegler's silence wasn't strategic. It was survival. Because anything she said would be dissected, mocked, or worse, used as proof that she still hadn't learned. Every deleted tweet, every dodged interview, every sudden hiatus was read like a headline. And behind those silences, the industry kept moving forward. Without her, studios refocused on actors they could trust. Crews shared stories in group chats that used to be locked behind NDAs. And Spielberg? He went back to doing what he does best, making movies that inspired generations. Lawrence returned to projects that sparked creativity instead of conflict. Neither man mentioned her name again publicly. They didn't need to, because by then, Rachel Zegler wasn't just missing from credits, she was missing from conversations. That's how quiet power works in Hollywood. No announcements, no courtroom drama, just doors that never open again. There were no boycotts, no hashtags, no angry mobs calling for her head. Instead, there was something far worse for any aspiring star: apathy. Not hate, but indifference. Rachel Zegler had gone from being the face of two beloved franchises to being someone Hollywood quietly hopes no one brings up in the next meeting. The story of Rachel Zegler isn't about one actress who misstepped. It's about the fragile ecosystem of modern Hollywood, a place where timing, tone, and temperament are just as important as talent. A place where legends like Spielberg and Lawrence don't just create careers, they decide when they end. And make no mistake, they didn't just decide this one was over. They showed the entire industry why. Because for every Rachel Zegler who burns bridges, there are 100 rising stars waiting patiently, respectfully for their shot. Actors who will honor the script, trust the director, and lift the crew, rather than lecture them. Hollywood is ready for change, but not at the expense of humility, professionalism, or the team behind the camera. As of now, Zgler's name is still technically active on casting databases. But when that name triggers red flags at every major studio, and when two of the most trusted filmmakers alive have quietly vowed to never work with her again, the writing isn't just on the wall, it's carved in stone. Whether she will rise from this depends not on a viral tweet, a rebrand, or a teary-eyed interview. It depends on whether Hollywood, cautious, brutal, and always watching, will ever forget what Spielberg and Lawrence saw. And so far, the answer is crystal clear. No, but Zgler isn't just out of the picture, she's been edited from the frame. If you found this expose eye-opening, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more uncensored behind-the-scenes Hollywood stories, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. The truth is out there, and we're just getting started.